Hi, I'm Rob Oseo. I just came back from watching Spider-Man Far From Home, and I have a few thoughts about it. I'm going to talk about the blip, then I'll talk about Mysterio and Jake Gyllenhaal and being an MCU supervillain, then I'll talk about the rest of the cast, some moments I liked and disliked, and how Far From Home fits into the greater MCU. To begin, the blip was bad. After Endgame finished, a lot of people started talking and realized there were some fridge logic problems with the 5-year jump and the Thanos snap and bringing everybody back in Endgame. Fact is, that 5-year jump causes problems. What happens to the people who lost their homes? Well, they mentioned that actually in Far From Home. What about people who lost a partner, grieved them, remarried, and then their partner came back, not noticing any time having passed at all? What happens to people who made bad life choices because of their grief after losing half of the people they knew? What happened in those 5 years? What happened to the world, to the institutions, to the world's food supply, the world economy? I read an article that said just the attack on New York from Avengers 1 would have been enough to send the world global economy into a tailspin. So what about erasing half of the entire world's population? What about people who, because of losing half the people they knew, made some bad life choices, like escape through addiction, other self-destructive choices, or even ending their own life? What's it like to blip away for 5 years and come back and suddenly your husband or wife is an addict or has completely changed as a person, has been harming themselves somehow? The 5-year jump causes problems and they weren't addressed. What happens to global food supply when half the world's population disappears? What happens to the global economy when half its labor force disappears? What happens to the global order of nations when half of the world's leaders disappear and everybody else is scared, frightened, and angry? Spider-Man Far From Home isn't a serious movie, so it would have had trouble dealing with these kinds of things. They try to pass it off in a throwaway joke that, oh, my younger brother is my older brother now. But there's just way more to it than that. The kind of grief that could cause Thor to let himself go and become what he was, that could cause Black Widow to want to pay any price to restore things, that would cause Hawkeye to make the choices he made. You can't just brush those off lightly. And let's not even mention that suddenly doubling the world's population, yes, it makes for a cute home video where a basketball team crashes into a marching band, but that would cause major chaos, not just in the world's food supply, but suddenly the world's population is doubled and everybody needs a job, everybody needs food to eat, everybody needs a place to live. Seeing Ant-Man walk around San Francisco, people have not been keeping things up. After a 5 years disappearance, coming back into the world that existed at the beginning of Endgame, there's a lot of stuff going on there that just wasn't addressed, and I'm disappointed about that. And I think that the 5-year jump and dealing with the blip so casually is the first major story mistake the MCU has made, and they haven't dealt with it well. So when Endgame came out, the Russos said, oh, well, we'll deal with it in Spider-Man Far From Home, but they haven't, not in a satisfactory way. Next, Jake Gyllenhaal as Mysterio. Jake Gyllenhaal handled the existence of the MCU in the best way a notable actor can, I think. Be the villain for a movie. Get in, get paid, make sure your character dies at the end, vamp, have fun, enjoy the fame cycle and the media cycle, and then get out of there. Cate Blanchett, Kurt Russell, and Josh Brolin knew how to play the MCU. Because Cate Blanchett made a great impact, she was fun to watch, and she's not on the hook for 10 more pictures. Kurt Russell did this too in Guardians of the Galaxy 2. Josh Brolin, he was in there for 2 films. Nobody's going to forget his performance, but he is also off the hook for the rest of the MCU, unless they find a way to bring Cable and Deadpool in. Michael Keaton is on the line because his character survived, so he might be back. But what you don't want to do, if you're an actor who wants to do interesting things, play interesting roles, and work with interesting filmmakers, is get on the hook for a 10-picture deal playing a hero like poor Sebastian Stan, who's going to be Bucky until he dies. Cate Blanchett did it right. Jude Law, Michael Keaton, by surviving the films where they were villains, they're at risk of coming back again and again. Now maybe they are hoping for a career transformation in the style of Tom Hiddleston's Loki, and those paychecks might be nice, but if you're like Cate Blanchett and you want to make Oscar bait films instead of superhero films where you're punching aliens, well, she played her cards as well as you possibly could. So, good luck to whoever gets good luck to whoever gets the role of Mr. Fantastic, or Sue Storm, or Wolverine, but whoever that is, they're going to be on the hook for 10 pictures. They're going to give up a decade of their life at least to this, where whoever gets to nail that villain part, they get to move along. Next, the cast. Quentin Beck was great. Jake Gyllenhaal was great as him. He has the look. He comes across just the way he's supposed to. He's persuasive at the beginning, and he sells the evil at the end. Tom Holland is my favorite Spider-Man, other maybe than Miles Morales in Into the Spider-Verse. He's a kid, he's fun, he's youthful, he's what Spider-Man is supposed to be, and he delivers the heroic bits, but he also delivers the teen bits, and Spider-Man is supposed to be about the teen experience. Zendaya is even better in this one than she was in the last one, I think. In the last one, I felt like there was kind of a tone fit problem between her parts and the rest of the film. But in this one, she fits better. The sweetness and awkwardness, but also maturity that she has in her charisma really worked well in this film. And her chemistry with Tom Holland is great. Spider-Man continues to be a good teen movie layered over top of a good superhero movie. And that's a hard needle to thread, but they've done it twice now. Most of this hinges on Tom Holland's likability, but they've really found the right guy for that. Moments. Best moment. I liked the moment when Spider-Man had to close his eyes and use his spider sense to get through the drones and finally make it face to face with Mysterio. That was my favorite moment. Second favorite moment, when Quentin Beck takes on the name that Peter Parker's friends gave him, Mysterio, and as he says it, he looks at Peter Parker with a significant gaze. This name is for you. I laughed out loud. Second best running joke, the way that Nick Fury and everybody else kept jerking around the school trip to Europe, changing the destinations, the hotels, and the events, activities as they went. Best running joke, the Peter tingle. I've never heard the Spidey sense described that way, but especially given that the Spider-Man transformation is a metaphor for puberty. Whoa, my body's changing. Sticky things are coming out of it. Calling his Spidey sense the Peter tingle was just perfect and hilarious every time they used it. Best throwaway gag? Edith. The Edith glasses were so Tony Stark. This happened in Thor Ragnarok too, when Bruce Banner had to get some Earth clothes, and the only ones he could find were Tony Stark's change of clothes on the Quinjet, and he was clearly wearing fashion that wasn't Bruce Banner's style. But this time, when Tom Holland put on those Robert Downey Jr. sunglasses, those were Tony Stark sunglasses, and they looked just silly on Peter Parker. It's a tiny detail, but to me it was just perfect. Worst moment? Other than the clumsy handling of the blip, which we talked about, and the city scale thing, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, the worst storytelling moment in this film was when they took about 5 minutes off the plot to give Jake Gyllenhaal a 5-minute speech about the team and why they were mad at Tony Stark and how they were going to get their revenge. And it was almost as tacky and cloying, and it ground the story to the halt in the same way as in Batman vs. Superman, when Wonder Woman just clicks through files to read about Aquaman and the Flash and Cyborg. Come on, you can find a better way to deliver information to the audience than that. Final verdict, Far From Home was almost as good as Homecoming, but I would say because of Michael Keaton and the fact that when Spider-Man Homecoming had its twist, they delivered that twist in about 3 seconds, and the full impact of it played out on Peter's face in 3 seconds. The 5-minute speech just diffused the impact of that twist way too much. In the end, I would say Homecoming is a better film altogether. But this one fits with Homecoming. It's of a piece tonally, and again, the casting is all really good in these films. This is what a Spider-Man film should look like. In comparison with the other Spider-Man films, I'm still going to take Spider-Man 2, the Sam Raimi Spider-Man 2, and Into the Spider-Verse above this. And I'll also take those two above Homecoming. But I would put this one almost on a par with Homecoming and probably better than the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man. So that would be about 4th out of the Spider-Man films, which is pretty good. When Spider-Man films are good, they're very, very good. They've set quite a high bar. So I'd say that's an impressive showing. The final thing I want to talk about is, and Mysterio actually calls it this, the Avengers level threat problem. The MCU has kind of painted itself into a corner now where it feels like they want to make each film deliver a bigger threat than the one before, or at least as big. What's happening because of that is we're becoming dull to planet-wide threats. I really do think that the climactic scene in the first Avengers movie is as big a battle scene as you can fit into a film, as big a battle scene as audiences can fit their heads around before everything just starts to blur together. One borough of New York City, that's about as big as it gets before, 2 boroughs of New York City looks about the same as one on a movie screen. And a whole city in Sokovia looks just like, again, it doesn't look any bigger really, because to show the size of it, you just have to move the camera farther back. Then even in a light, frothy film like Guardians of the Galaxy 2, Ego is planning to destroy like every single life-bearing planet in the galaxy. Sorry, but when are you going to dial it back again? In Ant-Man and the Wasp, they're protecting Henry Pym's technology from somebody who wants to steal it. Going smaller did not make that movie less fun. In fact, it might have made it more fun because we could relish some of the jokes, like Ant-Man riding a flatbed truck like a scooter, rather than sitting there thinking, oh no, the whole planet's going to be blown up. Thanos and his snap was actually a really good galaxy-level threat, because by eliminating half the people in the universe, every person suffered a personal cost. And that was what made the loss of the Thanos snap meaningful. Seeing Black Widow's grief, seeing Hawkeye's grief, seeing how Thor dealt with his loss and failure. That was what gave Thanos' snap impact. It wasn't the scale. The scale wasn't the thing that did it. And MCU is making a huge mistake if they think going bigger is going to make people care. The reason we care about these stories is because we care about the characters and what the characters want. One of the best MCU films so far was Civil War, where there wasn't a planet-destroying villain. It was just 2 people we cared about who both wanted a different thing and were ready to fight for it. The MCU needs to find ways to make the stakes smaller again, make us care about what the characters care about. John Wick was fighting about a dead puppy, but we were with him the whole way because they made us care about him and they made us care about the puppy, and that was enough. You don't need to blow up a planet to make an audience care. And if you keep blowing up planets, after a while the audience stops caring anyway because, I saw a planet blow up in the last one. So the MCU made a big mistake with the 5-year jump in the blip. The MCU is heading towards a problem, a big pitfall, if they can't figure out how to scale things back again. Maybe they'll figure something out while they're introducing new characters like the Fantastic Four, or maybe all the different characters of the X-Men, who in the good X-Men movies were really good at caring about things and fighting for the things they cared for in ways that we believed and rooted for them. If the MCU can get back to that, just give us characters we can root for, then, and they did give us characters we can root for in Spider-Man, then they've got a good future ahead. But if they think that the way to keep audiences is just to keep going bigger, I don't think it'll work. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed my opinions, and if you disagree or if you think I missed something, please leave a comment or a reply.